Okay guys, one of the things we're going to talk about today is transitions and thought patterns. Now we've already talked about using transitions in between paragraphs to kind of smoothly move your reader from one idea to the next. But one of the things we're going to talk about in this presentation is how you can use transitions to figure out what thought patterns that a writer is using, and that kind of sets up how you're going to interpret the text. So if you're reading a sociology book and you're getting kind of bored, identifying some of these thought patterns can help you kind of predict what's coming next, and kind of figure out how the author is trying to say what he or she is trying to say. When we were doing one of those practice reading exams earlier in the semester, some of you actually used transitions and thought patterns to figure out the way the author structured the information and then used that to figure out the answer to one of those questions. So there will be some sort of reading test at the end of the semester. Plans may have changed due to us not being on campus, but somehow we're going to assess those types of things, and working through this presentation and hopefully kind of keeping some of that in your mind while you're reading along can hopefully help you answer some of those questions correctly and get the grades you want. I will put this slideshow up on our Blackboard page so you can go back and review it, but I'm just going to point out a few things that you might want to take a look at while looking at these slides. Okay, so here we go. Again, just a reminder, this is not professionally done. These are going to be pretty awkward. You're going to have to deal with me mumbling and stumbling through them all. Okay. One other thing on transitions. One of the exercises that we're going to have for later today is going to involve really complex blended transitions. So far you've gotten 2 essays back, and I've been given a lot of 3s on those transitions. I often write the same comment. See the back of the rubric for an example of a 4 transition, a more blended transition. Many of your essays or on the rubrics rather, I've kind of circled the 4 on the back. If you want to pause this video for a second and kind of dig out both the essays I've given back to you, I think a lot of you will see that, and maybe you have not even flipped over and looked at the back of the rubric, but I think on a lot of yours you'll see that I kind of circled that 4 transition. So after we do this, we'll talk about a little exercise I've set up that'll hopefully help you get 4s on your transitions on the rubric section rather than 3s. And that'll cut down on my work because I won't have to write the same comment over and over and over again. Okay. All right, so when we talk about transitions and thought patterns in regards to reading, what you want to do is be conscious of how authors are using these 2 things to kind of signal where they're going. So we'll look at how transitions do that. We'll also look at thought patterns. Something else that's going to be important as we go through this PowerPoint is that it'll set up some of the future essays that we're going to do, including the division and classification, which is next, and the argumentative, which is last. Okay, so we know what transitions are because we've been using them in our own writing. I'll give you a second to read this. I'm not going to read it out loud to you. Okay, but we see here because shows the relationship between those 2 clauses. And then and is an additive, of course, so it lets us know that additional information is being provided. Okay. All right, something more new is thought patterns. Okay, they're established by using transitions to show a logical relationship between ideas in a paragraph or passage. Okay, what this means for you as a reader is that if you identify what transitions are being used, you can identify the type of information that's being provided to you. That helps you predict what's going to come next. If you're reading a textbook, it can help you outline so that you can kind of jot down things as you go along and know the relationship between pieces of information. One of the things that good readers do is learn to assess when and where to devote their attention. I probably shouldn't commit this to film, but if you become a really good reader, you can learn how to skim and find information without having to read and reread passages constantly. So the more you devote to reading now, the more time you'll have in the future, because you'll just kind of instinctively learn how these things work. And when you get to those dense texts that are such a bore to read, you kind of know where to really focus your attention and where you can kind of just kind of skim, get the vital points and move on ahead. So hopefully that'll make some of you happy. All right, give me a second here. So I go down a little bit. I wonder if my hand is showing up. Nope. Okay. So transitions can show examples of relationships within a sentence, right? Weight lifting builds and tones muscles. It also builds bone density. Okay, so you can see that there's a supporting point and additive there after the semicolon. Okay. All right, so here we see two transitions, when and before. Okay, so automatically when you start seeing those things, you should be thinking about an essay that we've done in the past, right? So consider we've done a narrative, we've done a descriptive, now we're working on the compare and contrast. So when you see when and before, you should be thinking about what type of essay. Hopefully you answered narrative. We talked about how narrative essays use chronological order. So you start to see a paragraph like this, you can start to predict, well, this is a narrative essay, it's using chronological order. I can start to predict that other details that are going to follow after the ellipses are going to follow that same pattern. And I know how to start reading this based on that information. Okay. All right, so here's some common patterns that we're going to look at, right? Time order, space order, listing, and classification. Okay. Now, the first two should really seem familiar to you, time order and space order, because we've talked about how we've used each of those in one of the last essays. Classification is going to be very important because the division and classification essay is the fourth essay that we're going to do. Listing happens a lot in all of the essays, especially argumentative essays. And we'll talk more about argumentative essays as we get to the fifth essay this semester. Okay. All right, so time order pattern, okay? A chain of events. Now we've already talked about how narrative essays use this. We've talked about chronological order. Another type of essay that uses this is a process essay, which we don't do in this class. But the purpose of a process essay is to explain to a reader how to do something. So you can see why using chronological order would make a lot of sense there as well. Okay. I think a lot of YouTube videos go through and talk about how to do a process. So you can kind of watch a YouTube video like that and look at how they work through chronological order, step by step. Okay. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to, I did say that I'm going to put these on our Blackboard page, and I will. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at each of these slides. You'll have access to them anytime you want them. Okay. But I'm going to read this and note the transitions, and then ask yourself, what type of essay is this? Okay. When Corbin decided to become a teacher, he had no idea that he was also deciding to become a career student. His first notions of wanting only a bachelor's degree were quickly dispelled. During those early years as a teacher, he found that the more he learned, the more excited he was about teaching. Eventually, his passion for learning earned him a master's degree and a doctorate degree. Okay, so consider for a second what type of essay that is. Okay, and hopefully you said narration, right? It started at the beginning, progressed through how he learned some things, and then eventually got to where he is today. Okay, now if you look at this list, you'll see that it's probably very similar to 2 slides ago, okay? A lot of the same transitions are going to be used for process. And you're already predicting, because you're good readers, and know that this next example I'm going to show you is, of course, a process. Although I disagree with how they tell you to floss. Okay? To ensure proper interdental cleaning, floss every day. First, break off about 18 inches of floss and wind most of it around one of your middle fingers. See, I think that's messed up. I never use my middle fingers when I floss. Second, wind the remaining floss around the same finger of the opposite hand. Third, hold the floss tightly between your thumbs and forefingers. Next, guide the floss between your teeth using a gentle rubbing motion. Never snap the floss into the gums. Then gently slide it into the space between the gum and the tooth. Okay, so a lot of the same transitions that we saw with the narrative essay, although this is designed to walk you through a process. Okay, it's not telling a story about something that's happened, but telling you what you should be doing as you go through this thing. Okay, so as a reader, if you start to see some of these transitions, you start to think, well, what process is being used? Is this a narration? Is this a process? And that'll help you kind of predict what's to come next and let you know how to process that information as you're working through. You might see a process essay in a lot of medical textbooks that you get. So if you're going into nursing, there might be a lot of process, explanations of how to treat a patient. I'm sure criminal justice textbooks have a lot of processes where, first you cuff the person you're arresting, then you read him or her, his or her Miranda rights, then you put them into the police car by covering their heads so they don't bonk it, okay, that type of thing. Okay, so next we're going to move to space order, okay? And again, we should be familiar with this because we've used it with descriptive essays. We talked about how when moving through something you're describing, you want to use some sort of spatial order, okay? So I said if you're describing your dream house, you might want to start on the front lawn, move into the house itself, then move into the backyard, okay, or start on the third floor, then move to the main floor, then the basement, something like that. Oh boy, just give me a second here because I just shot way down like I shouldn't have. No editing in these guys, you just have to deal with what I deal. Okay, so again, here's some space order patterns. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. The PowerPoint will be up. You can look at it anytime you want. Okay. From their heads to the tips of their tails, humpback whales bear distinctive markings. On top, a humpback whale is dotted with fleshy knobs called tubercles. A strand of hair with many nerve endings grows out of each of the tubercles. Okay, so we started at the top of the whale. We've gone into more detail with one of these tubercles. Okay, we can probably predict now, since we started on top, that we're going to move around the whale and then end in its belly. Okay. All right. Listing patterns are very important because authors may use these in argumentative essays. You may also see these within the different types of essays that we've talked about so far. Okay. So you can look for these as signals of the specific type of essay, or you may look at these as a subpoint to a main point that you may be looking at in any of these different essays. Remember we talked about major supporting details and minor supporting details. Listing patterns may come across as a minor supporting detail in any one of these other essays that we've talked about. Okay, and again, here are some of the ones that may be used. It'll be up so you can look at it at your leisure. Okay. An animal as large and beautiful as a horse needs to be cared for carefully. First, cleaning its stall on a regular basis is absolutely necessary. In addition, the horse needs to be groomed 3 to 5 times a week. Finally, a horse needs to be fed and exercised on a daily basis. Okay. This is different than past transitions we've seen because it doesn't matter which of these details goes where. Okay. It's not a process where you have to do one before the other. These are interchangeable. They're just a number of things that you have to worry about. Okay, that's what makes it different than, say, a process essay. Okay, now the next one's going to be really important because it sets up our fourth essay, the division and classification essay. A lot of students say that this is the most difficult essay. This is the one I really like because it really forces people to think. Okay, with classification, what you're trying to do is sort ideas into smaller groups and then describe the traits of each group. Okay, we'll start this essay, I believe, next week. Okay, so when you're looking at these subgroups, the transitions help show why that subgroup exists and its relationship to everything else. Okay, so here's some of the things you might be looking at with a classification pattern. Okay. All right, now I'm going to give you an example. Okay, keep this in mind as we move into our next essay. Okay. Wetlands is a general term that includes several types of vital links between water and land. Okay, so there's kind of the topic sentence there. One type of wetland is a bog. It is characterized by spongy peat deposits, acidic waters, and is covered by a carpet of sphagnum moss. Okay, so one type tells us one of the ones that we're looking at, and then we have a definition so that we understand what that means. Another type of wetland is the marsh, which is a wetland frequently swamped with water. It is characterized by soft-stemmed vegetation. Finally, a swamp is a type of wetland dominated by woody plants. Okay, so if I were kind of outlining this, I would use the one, another, and finally as major supporting points, because each one of those is a classification of wetlands. Okay, and then the definition is a minor supporting point beneath those 3 points that tells me exactly what that is. Okay, so if I'm reading this as a textbook, okay, I can take those transitions, easily kind of break it down. Wetlands, okay, bog, marsh, swamp, and then underneath each one of those, I've got the subpoint that tells me what it is. Okay, I know what the author's trying to tell me and why he's giving me that information, and I can process that pretty easily. Okay, all right. So wrapping this up, look for these things in textbooks. Okay, the more you're conscious of how these things are being used, the easier it becomes to kind of process the information that they're giving you. Really quick outline it in a notebook or something so that when you have to review, you don't have to read that whole chapter. And it kind of gives you an understanding of like, well, what pieces of information should we be picking out of here. Okay, it's just the chapter review. Okay, I'll leave that slide up for a second, but of course, again, this will all be on our Blackboard page as soon as this is posted. Okay, got another chapter review there. Okay, and I'm not even going to go to the last slide because it's unimportant to us. Okay, what is important to us is thinking about how we can use transitions for our own writing. What's really important to you is how to use that rubric to get a 4 instead of a 3. Okay, so here's some things I want you to do. First of all, if you haven't already, get out those first couple essays that I've given you. Look at the part on the rubric that assesses transitions and see whether you're getting a 3 or a 4. Okay? If you're getting a 3, I've very likely urged you in my comments to use more complex blended transitions. Okay, and I've probably circled an example of the 4 on the back of the rubric. So if you haven't taken a look at that, please do that now. Okay? The idea with these complex blended transitions that I'm talking about really applied to not the first topic sentence, but the second and the third, and the fourth and the fifth, however many more you have beyond that. Okay, what you want to do with a more complex blended transition is take the reader from the previous idea that you talked about and kind of merge it into the next idea. Okay, so if my first topic sentence is, first, my daughter Peyton is awesome because she's helping me with these videos. Okay, that's fine. Okay. My second body paragraph is going to introduce a second reason why Peyton is awesome. She's awesome because she's a great singer. All right. So what I want to do with a blended transition is kind of recall the first body paragraph as I move into the second one. So instead of saying, second, Peyton is awesome because she's a great singer, I want to do something like this. Not only is Peyton awesome because she's a great singer, comma, but she's also fabulous. Oh, scratch that. Okay. Not only is Peyton awesome because she's helping me with this video, comma, but she's also fantastic because she's a great singer. Okay, so I'm kind of recalling the first thing I talked about in the first body paragraph and then merging it with the second body paragraph. My third body paragraph is going to be about how she's helpful around the house. Okay, so I might say, finally, in addition to helping me with videos and being an awesome singer, Peyton is fantastic because she helps around the house. Okay, so for homework for today, and remember, you need to complete each assignment I give so that I can give you credit for logging on and being present in class. This is a mandate from the school, so make sure you do this. I've provided a list of about, I forget how many, I think 20 thesis statements, topic sentences. Okay, your job is to take each one of those and write me a complex blended transition for the second and third point. Okay, I'm going to ask that you email me that and turn it in by, let's say, 5 o'clock this evening. Okay, so that'll be available on our Blackboard page. Download it, do whatever you need to do, cut and paste it, whatever you have to do. Take those topic sentences and give me complex blended transitions. Okay, I'll give you some feedback once you give it to me. And then moving forward, make sure you do that in your second and third body paragraphs so that I can give you a 4. This is going to make everybody happy. You guys are going to get better grades. I'm going to spend less time writing the same darn thing on everyone's papers, and life will be good. Okay, that's it for this PowerPoint. I believe for my Monday, Wednesday class, I have another one that I need to get through. Sorry, guys, you're stuck with my voice for a little bit longer. Okay, bye-bye.